and welcome to Against All Odds. My name is Rachel Munyeheli and we want to thank you for watching this program. I'm sure it's always inspiring when we bring these stories that actually touch your heart, coming through there from people you can relate to. Today's story is about a lady who has been living with HIV for the past 23 years. Now you can imagine at the time there was a lot of stigma that was facing HIV, but today it's a whole different story. And this story should inspire you to say that if you are living with HIV, then you have nothing to worry about, but also breaking the barriers when it comes to stigma and what the community and society has to do in order for us to live in an harmonious way without criticizing or looking down upon people living with HIV. I'm not here to tell that story. Tendai is. Please help me welcome Tendai to the program. Tendai, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
You look so lovely. I love the colors.
Thank you. I always want to look nice all the time.
All right, Tendai. So let's just take you back a little bit. Maybe you can just tell us in brief about your upbringing.
Okay. My name is Tendai Westerhof. I'm a mother of 4 daughters and I have 6 grandchildren. I'm living openly with HIV. I grew up in a mining town at Empress Nickel Mine in Kadoma and also at Renko. And I went to school at Rio Tinto, Jombe High School in the Midlands in Kwekwe. From there on, I think around 1985, soon after the death of my father, we moved to Kadoma. That's where I now live. That's the place that we now call home.
Oh, that's amazing.
I'm a career woman and I've worked both in the private sector and I've been a former model, I've been a businesswoman, and now I'm in the NGO sector, mostly to do with health, fighting HIV and AIDS.
That's amazing. Now, talking about living with HIV, let's talk about the first time you found out about this. How was it like for you? What was the experience like? Maybe you can walk us through that.
Yes, I've spoken about it many, many times. And it was something that was sudden, that I did not expect. And because at that time I knew very little about HIV and AIDS. And I looked healthy. And I never also thought that one day I would have the condition of an HIV positive status. So circumstances around my life at that time led me to get tested for HIV. And when I went for my test, it was a torrent experience. Even the counselor who spoke with me, I actually didn't know what to tell her because I went wearing on a wig, a big tracksuit, big sunglasses. I even parked my vehicle about 3 blocks away. I went to a New Start Center at that time. New Start Centers were very, very popular. One that was in town along Kwame Nkrumah Avenue. That's how I got tested for HIV. And when my results were shared with me, I was just confused. I didn't know what exactly it meant, though the counselor had assured me to say, well, it's a condition and there are further tests that I needed to undergo, but there is also HIV treatment that I could take to ensure that I can live with that condition. So my reaction was very, I felt it was uncertain. I was in a state of shock and also uncertain, and I didn't know also who to share that with at that time. And I was even afraid to be known that I was living with HIV.
If you can tell us, which year was that specifically?
In 2002.
All right.
And I vividly remember that date. It was the 14th of February, 2002.
It was Valentine's Day.
It was, yes, it was, I think so. I can't really remember, but it was the 14th of February, 2002. That was the fateful day of my life when I discovered that I had HIV.
You mentioned that when you went to the New Start Center at that particular time, you were wearing on a big tracksuit, you had glasses on, you parked a distance away from the New Start Center. What was the purpose of that? What was behind your thought process when you were doing that?
Yes, I just didn't want people to see me walking into the New Start Center, because there was so much misinformation, misconceptions, and AIDS was associated. In fact, they were not that time. They were not talking about HIV. People were talking about AIDS. And if you were seen going into the New Start Center, people did not understand that you could actually go into New Start Center for various reasons, maybe to get information, to visit a friend, but many just thought if you go in there, you have AIDS. They used to say you have AIDS. And I did not want people to know that I had AIDS, because it was associated with all the terrible things, the shamefulness, spitefulness, all the bad things that you could think of. That's why I did not want people to know that I was walking into the New Start Center. And my face, I've always been in the media and everywhere. Many people knew me. Even the children who live in the street who would see me sometimes parking my Mercedes Benz during that time. That's the car I used to drive in the street. They would say, oh, there is Tendai. How are you, madam? So I just didn't want them to see me going to the New Start Center, just in case there was going to be misconception. And the next day I was just afraid to say headline saying Tendai Westerhof walked into a New Start Center. Yeah. You know, I just laugh about it now because I find the whole thing to be so funny.
But at the time, it was obviously you were overwhelmed and you were trying to, considering that it was 2002, yes, there was a bit of advancement because treatment was now there. But at the time, I can imagine how you felt. Now, after receiving your results, after receiving counseling and then going home, did you keep this information to yourself, or you found a confidant that you actually told about your status at the time?
I kept it to myself. The only confidant that I had at that time was my husband, whom I shared the news with. And we were the two people who knew about it. But as time went on, this thing started to eat me up, because all facets of HIV were now affecting me. You know, you are in a marriage, there's the discovery of that HIV, and a lot of things happen also, So I would say that I experienced all the facets of HIV and AIDS. And as time went on, this led to me to start to think about the disclosure of my HIV status. And some of the disclosure was very unintentional. Because, you can imagine that at that time I was around 35 years.
Okay.
And I never knew that we had an AIDS service organization in Zimbabwe, and yet the HIV program had started as far as 2000. There were organizations working in HIV and AIDS, and sometimes we'll just see people on TV, but I never put it in my mind that I would end up in that field. So I took a zeal to go out there to learn about what this AIDS was all about, and how it affects a person. So because I was learning, I started to discover that there were other organizations out there who were actually giving out information about HIV and AIDS. And that's how I also came to know about the National AIDS Council. I didn't know about it. And I knew about organizations like ZAPSO and SAFEDS. So my first port of call was to go to SAFEDS and to PSI, Population Services at that time, international at that time. So as I was getting that information, I would go talk to the people. And then one would just ask me, but why do you want this information? And then I would just say, in fact, I would say, I tested positive to HIV. And some of them would look at me in awe,
Oh, yeah.
But I'm glad to say, I took it intentionally. It came from within me. Nobody forced me to disclose.
Okay.
And remember, I also had a doctor who tested me for HIV where I used to go. And I also spoke with him. And when I told my doctor at that time, because I had also discovered that I was pregnant. So when I told my doctor that I wanted to disclose, he says, no, you cannot do it. People are going to hate you. And I said, no, but there's something within me that is
wants
telling
to tell
me
people about
that
this.
I feel a huge burden. I I have to talk about this.
I'm going to have to stop you on that for just a bit. Now you can tell the passion that is there, and she wants to tell the story of how it happened. But when we come back from the break, we want to find out the stigma that was around HIV at that time, and all about disclosure and why she was so eager to disclose. This is Against All Odds. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Against All Odds. Now we continue with the story. Now Tendai, just before the break, you were talking about you went to the doctor and you were telling your doctor, I want to disclose my status. I want people to know. And you also mentioned at that time you were pregnant as well. So these are all the things that were going through your head. At that time, just tell us about the advancement when it came to living with HIV, also being pregnant, the stigma that was around it. How did that go for you?
Yes. It was very difficult. And when I look back, I just don't know how I managed to navigate all these years. People may see me smiling, looking all good, and think that I also did not cry. I also went into depression. And because I was depressed, I experienced a lot of anxiety. And that was the push that made me to continue to talk about it. And I'm that kind of a person whereby whenever I went to visit my doctor or I go to the clinic, I would just end up saying, I'm HIV positive. I would not even say I'm living with HIV. I would say I'm HIV positive, because it's like I was mourning. I needed the support. I needed to be understood, So at the same time, I was pregnant. There I was pregnant. And little did I know that there was the prevention of mother-to-child transmission program that our government and through the Ministry of Health and Child Care was offering during those days. As we lacked the information was not there. So I got it from the private doctor when I fell pregnant, where I went for my antenatal clinic. He is the one who introduced me to the prevention of mother-to-child transmission of HIV. So he would sit down with me whenever I go there. And I cannot mention him by name. It was a male doctor. And he would explain things to me to say, okay, fine. And remember, just before that, I had to go for my viral load testing, my CD4 count testing, and other treatments. And I was put also on treatment. But personally, I was buying my treatment from the private sector. It was very expensive. During that time when our currency was very strong, I remember I would buy my HIV treatment for around $280,000 Zimbabwean dollars. At that time, I was taking branded ones, the AZT, etc. Because I didn't know that we could also get treatment in the public health sector. And because of the stigma, I was even afraid to go to a place like Wilkins or any other public health institution to look for HIV treatment, because people were going to see me and conclude that I have AIDS. So my doctor was my pillar, my mother, my children, and my family, and a few circle of friends. And some of those, they've traveled the 23 years with me up to today. So when I told my doctor, he introduced me to the elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV. During those days, it used to be called the PMTCT. And I was told that, no, it's safe after he did certain tests. And I had a roster whereby I would go for my antenatal clinics, So towards my 9 months, I would go more often, say every 2 weeks, until on a weekly basis. And I would advise that I could give birth by cesarean section. 6 weeks before delivery, I was put on treatment to prevent the HIV from me, the mother, to the child.
Yes.
So I was given nevirapine 6 weeks before delivery. And there were options that I was given at that time. Because, the HIV pandemic, it has evolved. So the way positive women at that time and the way positive women who are pregnant now, the treatment is now different.
Yes.
Because now an HIV positive woman who is pregnant and has been put on treatment on AZT on treatment to prevent the transmission of mother-to-child transmission can give a normal birth.
Yeah.
And they cannot really, the chances of infecting their children with their baby with HIV are very slim. But for us at that time, the options were either a cesarean section. After that, probably you undergo tubal ligation. This is tying of the womb, so that next time you will not fall pregnant and have a baby again.
Okay.
You know? And I could not breastfeed during that time. Positive mothers were not encouraged to breastfeed. But I hasten to quickly correct to say that today, women who are living with HIV who fall pregnant can have a normal delivery and are encouraged to exclusively breastfeed their children, their babies for 6 months. I didn't. You can imagine, cesarean section.
And then you were not able to breastfeed
I was not
well.
able to hold my baby close to my chest to breastfeed. I had to depend on formula. And at that time, my business had collapsed because I disclosed my status. Everything, the whole world had just turned upside down. Sometimes I would struggle to buy formula for milk for my baby. She used to drink naan. I remember very well. And naan was imported from South Africa. It wasn't manufactured locally. So it was a mammoth task, but I said to myself, I'm going to live. And as time also went on, I was now building my capacity around issues of HIV and AIDS, surviving with it. Being a mother, you know, a young mother who had a baby. So I took the zeal, and
I can clearly tell
I actually managed
wanted.
to look after my baby, you know, and my baby was HIV negative. And I also had the courage to take her for testing 18 months later. And she tested negative to HIV. And when she was a teenager, we repeated the test. It was all negative. And she has never had any health problems associated with the HIV. Soon after delivery, a few hours after delivery, they put her on nevirapine, and I did not breastfeed. She was only on formula. And as time went on, I also introduced solid foods gradually. And then there she was.
A bouncing baby girl.
Bouncing baby girl who was intelligent at school, good at sports, and other. But that's a story for another day. Let's continue the focus on me, the mother.
Well, as you can actually hear what she actually went through living with HIV. And at the time, she wasn't saying, I'm living with HIV. She was actually saying, I have HIV, with the urge of wanting to disclose her HIV status. Not because, she wanted everyone to know, but it was sort of a coping mechanism for her, but also trying to find out a little bit more information surrounding her condition so that she can realize how best she can survive as a mother who was pregnant, as a mother who was trying to stop the transmission from mother to child. She was so eager to get information. When we come back from the break, we want to find out from Tendai, now that she's living with HIV, and it has been 23 years, from what it was back in 2002 to what it is in 2025, what has she done as a woman to encourage those around her who are in a similar position to live with a positive mindset? This is Against All Odds. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Against All Odds. Now, as you can hear, we are talking to Tendai, who is living with HIV for the past 23 years. Now, Tendai, we want to take a look at from 2002, from then till now, as a woman living with HIV. Maybe if you can just, take us through the difference of what you've noticed and the advancements that have come through, looking at 2025 compared to back then.
Yes, I take myself as a case study. In 2002, I was not like this. But the introduction of high effective antiretroviral therapy became a game changer for people living with HIV. And I'm glad that even as a country, we committed to fight HIV and AIDS by ensuring that treatment for people living with HIV was available. And as the HIV evolved also, the advocacy throughout there, we came to a point that people were being encouraged to get tested for HIV, irrespective of your CD4 count. As long as you test positive to HIV, you were immediately put on treatment. That's a game changer. Treatment brought hope to people like me. We can talk about it. We can educate others in communities. And a lot of women living with HIV, when they saw my story here, right here on TV, that I had given birth and I successfully underwent a PMTCT program, we saw a lot of women who are HIV positive, who were living with HIV and pregnant, enrolling on the program. And it's a testimony that a lot of babies were born AIDS-free. And those children now are over 20 years old, whose mothers took the initiative to go on the program. And besides that, I brought the whole aspect of positive living into life. Look at me. Don't I look good?
You do. You actually
I
do.
come from a modeling background. And I say to myself, I will not let the HIV be a spoiler of my desires and my aspirations for life. I continued to look good. I even introduced a program with young girls and young boys called Models Against AIDS. And I worked with such organizations like the National AIDS Council, UNAIDS, UN Women, SAFAIDS, and a lot of others that came on board to help drive the vision that I had. And I remember one time, the current president, ED, he was Speaker of Parliament. He allowed us to have members of Parliament from the Portfolio Committee go for public HIV tests at that time. And he even allowed us to go into the Parliament to turn it upside down and to show that documentary. Even here on ZBC, that documentary was shown several times, and it became a model in the region, in Southern Africa, the first of its kind where public figures got tested for HIV and AIDS. So you can see the power and influence of a celebrity or a known person. I was a known person. I don't know whether I can call myself a celebrity or not, but I was a popular person. My disclosure brought hope to a lot of people who are afraid to get tested for HIV. A lot of people who were afraid to come out about their HIV positive status. And we started forming women's groups, support groups in various communities around Zimbabwe. Today, I'm the national director of the Pan-African Positive Women's Coalition, which is a coalition of women living with HIV, over 20,000 women living with HIV across Zimbabwe. We have structures. We continue the advocacy at community level. We continue creating an awareness of HIV and AIDS and other communicable and non-communicable diseases at community level. We continue the advocacy of encouraging families, women, pregnant women, to go for early testing of HIV once they fall pregnant, so that we reduce new HIV infections in children, including TB. And we are also advocating, talking about advanced HIV disease, which is now there. We discover that sometimes a mother can give birth to a child who is positive, and they hide the child when they are under 5. The child, end up dying, because the mother did not take the initiative, or the family, to take the child to the hospital so that they can access treatment. Treatment is there. It's for free. And what I like about it, that treatment is for everyone. It doesn't mean that you are rich or what, you cannot go on the government program. You can go to any public health institution, get tested for HIV, you are put on treatment. They are not worried about whether you are a director, whether you are a business person or so. The treatment for HIV in Zimbabwe, it's just for everyone. And a person like me, I took advantage of it. I live. Now I proudly talk about the undetectable, untransmissible, and untransmittable. I can actually dance about it, because I'm a U equals to you, which means I cannot transmit HIV to my sexual partner. Even if I go for an HIV lab test right now, my viral load is so insignificant to even be picked up by a lab test, and I cannot transmit. So if we can get more people getting tested, being put on treatment just after 3 to 6 months, your viral load becomes suppressed and you become undetectable. Then we can beat AIDS by 2030. But we have one problem now. We need to ensure that we have sufficient funding to fund HIV programs. Programs that us as communities we are advocating on the ground. We also need those resources so that we see a lot of Tendais and their children towards that AIDS-free generation.
I like the fact that you are actually pushing for this, and you're saying that it's not only for women, but we're saying for everyone, but also making women realize that, you know, even if you're a mother, you can actually make sure that there's no mother-to-child transmission, and even to make sure that your own child should also get regularly tested. So things like this, and, you know, like you said, a famous person, an influencer who can come through and play a part is actually very important. Maybe your final words in short of what you'd want to say to the next woman who wants to be a Tendai. What would you want to say to her?
Yes, to the women out there, I would like to say, yes, we experience a lot of predisposing factors that make us vulnerable to HIV. But let's try to engage even our partners to reduce gender-based violence, to try to condomize in sexual relationships when we are not ready to have children. And let's go out there. We have a lot of AIDS service providers who have this information, who offer counseling and various services are on offer. Get the right information regarding your health and your HIV status. But we cannot talk about an HIV status at a personal level if you have not been tested for HIV. We want people to get tested for HIV. And to societies and to communities out there, I'm saying support your relative who is living with HIV. Let's work towards eradicating stigma and discrimination. Let's see HIV, an HIV positive status as a normal condition, because the game changes the treatment. It can be managed. A person who is living with HIV can work, can be employed. For mothers, they can have children. And we also want male involvement in this game. Male involvement in that, it's another game changer towards eliminating mother-to-child transmission and ending gender-based violence that cause more women to be infected with HIV.
Well,
so I encourage communities. We are in this together. And I would just like to say hashtag together we can end HIV.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and I love your passion, and it's always great having you and people like you on the show that can actually help the communities as well. Well, there you have it, coming through there from Tendai, and she's saying that it's all about taking the first initiative to make sure that you know your HIV status. And if you're living with HIV, then you know that it's definitely not the end of the world, but you can actually achieve anything that you want. My name is Rachel Munyeheli. These are the stories that we share right here on Against All Odds. I hope this has inspired you, but until next time, do take care.